Coming up on Arirang News, President Moon Jae-in has come out against proposals to open the Seoul area's greenbelts to development to solve a housing shortage. He says the green areas need to be conserved for future generations and to protect the environment. The Greater Seoul area is officially reopening its museums, art galleries, and performance venues. They're at limited capacity, though, and quarantine rules still apply. And as part of the Korean New Deal, the government says it's going to provide employment insurance to virtually all workers, even freelancers and the self-employed. It's 5:00 p.m. here in Seoul. Thank you for tuning in to Arirang News. I'm Devin Whiting. Museums, art galleries, and libraries in the Seoul metropolitan area are reopening for the first time in weeks. The number of COVID-19 infections in the area has been falling, but visitors still have to follow quarantine rules, and only a limited number of people will be let in at a time. Yoon Jung-min reports.
South Korea is reopening museums, galleries, and libraries in Seoul and its surrounding areas as the COVID-19 situation in the capital seems to be improving. They must only allow a certain number of visitors to prevent overcrowding, while a QR code verification system will be used to manage the list of people coming in. Visitors are asked to abide by quarantine measures.
In the early stages, facilities should limit the number of visitors, introduce an electronic registration system, and visitors are asked to wear face masks. We'll allow more visitors in phases.
The reopenings come more than a month since the government imposed stricter rules on those facilities in late May because of a spike in number of COVID-19 cases due to cluster infections. 10 major museums, including the National Museum of Korea, will only allow up to 30% of the maximum number of people that would normally be allowed in. Reservation must also be made in advance. 8 major art facilities, including the National Theater of Korea, are limiting the number of visitors by 50%. 12 kinds of high-risk facilities, including bars and karaoke rooms, will still be asked to limit the number of people and abide by the government's strict quarantine rules. Also, people will still not be allowed to attend professional sports events, including baseball and soccer matches. Authorities say a decision on reopening them will largely depend on the number of new infections in Seoul. South Korea's capital area has seen a little over 10 new COVID-19 infections on average over the past 2 weeks, down from 19 during the previous 2 weeks. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News.
The total number of coronavirus cases around the world is now more than 14.5 million. The country with the most is the United States, with around 3.7 million. Brazil has more than 2 million, with fatalities reported even among infants. Our Kim Jae-hee has the latest.
The country hit hardest by the COVID-19 pandemic, the U.S. is seeing no let-up in virus cases. According to Johns Hopkins University, the U.S. has now had more than 3.7 million cases and 140,000 deaths. Florida reported more than 12,000 new cases on Sunday, the 5th day in a row that the state has seen more than 10,000 new cases. The state of Texas, after 5 straight days of more than 10,000 new cases, reported 7,300 new cases on Sunday. Texas is also seeing the virus spreading among babies. One county in Texas reported on Friday that 85 infants under 1-year-old had tested positive for the virus. But President Trump continues to downplay the pandemic. In an exclusive interview on Fox News Sunday, he claimed the U.S. has one of the lowest mortality rates in the world and said the cases are up due to what he called its best testing. He also reiterated that the pandemic will disappear. Over in Brazil, the second hardest hit country, death toll is nearing 80,000 with more than 2 million infections. This comes just 4 months after the country confirmed its first death from the virus in mid-March. The country's been reporting fatalities among infants and young children as well. A 7-month-old baby who died last week was confirmed to have had the virus on Sunday. Earlier this month, a 2-year-old was confirmed to have died from the virus, and a 3-month-old baby died in April. Brazil's top office hasn't been spared either. Brazilian media outlets suggest around 150 employees in Brazil's presidential office have caught the virus. This comes after President Bolsonaro tested positive for COVID-19 earlier this month. The president, who had been isolated since his confirmation, thanked his supporters on Sunday as they gathered to greet him at his official residence, Alvorada Palace in Brasilia. Kim Jae-hee, Arirang News.
In other news, as a way to bring down South Korea's soaring home prices, the floor leader of the ruling Democratic Party, Kim Tae-yeon, is saying it might help to move the Blue House and the National Assembly out of Seoul to the administrative city of Sejong. In a speech on the floor Monday, Kim suggested that relocating those parts of the government could ease the Seoul area's overpopulation issues. He also vowed to strengthen regulations on the ownership of multiple homes. Regarding the peace process on the Korean peninsula, Kim said he would be willing to visit Washington and Beijing together with opposition lawmakers to try and make a breakthrough. Diplomacy by lawmakers, he said, is needed at this point, and he called on the North to stop its hostile acts and return to the negotiating table. President Moon Jae-in has decided not to open Seoul's greenbelt zones to development to preserve the areas for future generations. His position was made public following a weekly meeting today with Prime Minister Chung Se-kyun. The government has been looking for land on which to build homes in response to the capital's soaring real estate prices. Some ruling party lawmakers and other top officials wanted parts of the greenbelt to be used for that purpose. Others were opposed, though, citing the need to protect the environment and keep the city from overexpanding. The government instead will consider using other land owned by the state or public institutions. One of the main parts of the government's Korean New Deal is strengthening the social safety net. The government's announced an expansion of employment insurance to cover virtually everyone, even the self-employed and freelancers. Kim Sung-min reports.
In an effort to strengthen the country's social safety net, the South Korean government is aiming to put all sectors of workers under employment insurance by 2025.
Since the country is experiencing the COVID-19 outbreak, the need to protect new forms of employment such as freelancers and those who are hired under special contracts has become an urgent task.
Under the proposed changes, freelancers and the self-employed who are not currently covered by employment insurance would benefit. This is similar to the current Danish model where everyone who is working is covered by insurance based on their income. The groups affected by the change include non-standard contract employees like artists, delivery workers, insurance agents, and caregivers. This will bring the current 14 million odd beneficiaries up to around 20 million by 2025. However, this change will still not cover certain groups like soldiers, public servants, and private school teachers. The expansion will gradually take place from next year, starting with artists and those who are categorized as special contract groups. Once these groups fall under the insurance, they can receive unemployment benefits of up to 60% of their income for 9 months if they lose or transfer their jobs. They are also eligible for occupational health and safety insurance and maternity support. The changes require amendments to some of the current employment insurance laws. For example, right now, employment insurance is based on wages, but this standard will have to be based on income. The Labor Ministry says it'll cooperate with other departments to come up with a specific roadmap to get information on income. Laying the groundwork, the government has already made some changes in the related laws to include the new groups and is aiming to finalize the changes by the end of this year. Kim Sung-min, Arirang News.
Time now for an in-depth look at the market news on this Monday, and for that I'm joined on the line by Dr. Song Soo-young, Professor of Finance at Jungang University. Professor Song, thank you for making time today.
Yeah, good to see you again.
Well, stocks on Wall Street were rather mixed on Friday. The Dow closing lower, the S&P and Nasdaq up, though, by about the same amount. Korean stocks started out sharply lower today, but recovered much of that by the time they closed. What's the story in the markets today?
Yeah, currently, as far as I see, the Kospi and the Kosdaq index, both key indexes in Korea, had shown that minus 14.14 percentage points and negative minus 0.16 percentage point, respectively. However, in the worldwide, particularly the futures market in New York has shown that some S&P 500 would fall in the upcoming because in New York is right now on Sunday evening, and so therefore, however, in Europe, particularly the coronavirus recovery fund has been stalled right now, but ultimately and eventually they are going to make an agreement. So the FTSE 100 in the United Kingdom has shown some flat movement, and also in Japan, the topics has shown some losing. However, in the China market, because of the recent flood damage on the economy, has shown there's some prospect for some larger fiscal expansion for the building and construction sectors expect. So there is a 2.4% increase of the Shenzhen and the Shanghai stock market. So overall, the fundamental issues has not been fully reflected in the stock market. Then we can say that the divergence between the prospect of the economy and some increasing stock price has revealed some really fundamental flaws of pricing of the stocks maybe. But psychological factor plays a very important role to show the divergence between the stock market index and the prospect of the real economy. But eventually they will converge, and we must be, the government should be very worried of the future downturn of the economy. So fiscal expansion is necessary in the future. I'm pretty confident of that.
Well, speaking of fiscal expansion, we've got a lot of spending going on under the Korean New Deal, or at least in the planning stages. In particular, we just heard about the expansion of employment insurance to many people. And in total, we're talking over $100 billion for this whole New Deal program. What do you think about all this, Professor Song?
Yeah, particularly today is the Minister of the Employment and Labor make some announcement of some detailed plan of how to implementation of the New Deal, Korean-style New Deal. Particularly, I welcome the movement, particularly for the expansion of the social safety net to the older people. But it is going to take time. So, in the short term, what would be necessary because of the expansion of social safety net through the spread out of some employment benefit and unemployment insurance to older people, particularly the specially contracted workers. However, that would take time. So in the short term, I would like to, I see some in detailed plan of the government to have some public employment plan, which is similar, equivalent to some job guarantee program. So regardless of the background, the current New Deal and the Green New Deal and Digital New Deal both requires, particularly the Green New Deal requires some kind of supply, demand of the labor. Therefore, I welcome the government's plan, particularly for the providing some job guarantee program. I think that is a really good relief for the people who lose the job, but have not received yet some benefit or unemployment insurance yet. I think so. To that regard, I welcome the movement, government step and the movement.
Well, Professor, we're almost out of time, but it's Monday, and tell us a bit about what's coming up this week.
In Bank of Korea's announcement of the producer price index and the real GDP growth rate for the second quarter. And then I believe there is not much change, but I would like to see that some positive, at least Korea is better than some of the other leading some countries such as United States or United Kingdom and Brazil. So I expect a little bit adjustment, but overall there is not much change of the second quarter prospect of the real GDP. But upcoming third quarter, fourth quarter, we are going to see some really the impact of the economy by the spread out the coronavirus, particularly from the foreign market because of the export and import trade could be reduced significantly. That would be some bad atmosphere in the future. But domestic market, because of the government support, I do not expect some bad indicator in the upcoming quarter.
All right, Professor, got it. We'll have to check in with you again about those numbers when they come out. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you.
Now, the city of Seoul is going to put more eco-friendly electric buses on the roads in the months to come to reduce air pollution. Using around $20 million from the government's budget for the Green New Deal, the city is going to add an extra 166 electric buses to its fleet in the second half of the year. They'll start operating from October. By the end of this year, there'll be almost 400 electric buses operating in Seoul. They're not only better for the environment, they're much quieter and will save the city $2.3 million in annual operating costs. The city also said that by the end of next year, it's aiming to have a full fleet of eco-friendly buses. South Korea's flagship carrier Korean Air is moving to convert some of its passenger planes into cargo planes to deal with the precipitous drop in passenger numbers caused by the pandemic. According to industry sources, Korean Air is in discussions with the Transport Ministry about removing seats on some of its Boeing 777s and haul cargo in the cabins starting mid-August. If approved, the company expects that would add at least 10 tons of cargo volume per flight. Korean Air has suspended most of its international passenger flights since March, and 70% of its 20,000 employees have been on paid leave since April. That brings us to the end of this newscast. Thank you for watching. More live news coming your way at 7 p.m. Korea time.